Welcome to QX Church. I'm Pastor Scott Conway, and we're talking about wedding vows. I've done more weddings than usual lately. I've been asked about more weddings than usual lately. Friends of mine have been attending weddings, and so in light of all of this, I thought it might be a good opportunity to talk about wedding vows. Today's going to be an overview. When I do a full ceremony, and I do abbreviated ceremonies sometimes, an abbreviated ceremony is just usually I show up, I don't really know the people, but I'm helping them move their relationship from a not married relationship to a married relationship, and I'm generally always in favor of doing things like that. And I might do an abbreviated ceremony for those purposes, but for a full ceremony, a full wedding, there's typically a wedding message, and my wedding message is commonly a 20-minute version of today. Just giving an introduction of what vows are going to be made and what the vows mean in this ceremony. And we're going to unpack that in a bit more detail in this message. So if someone is considering having me do their wedding, that they'll know what I mean by the vows. I tend to use very traditional words. There's a modern meaning to the words. We go into them more deeply. And a couple of the probably more unusual things that are well worth deeply considering, those will be in separate messages. But we're going to do an overview today. So we do traditional words and a modern meaning. So the traditional vows include things like love, honor, cherish, obey, have, hold, better or worse, richer or poor, sickness and health, forsake cleaving, and as long as we both shall live. And we're just going to touch on each one of these briefly as we go. So a promise to love. And this is one of the things about wedding vows is fundamental to everything, is people want to get married because they love each other. A fundamental of love starts off with, I want the best for you. A second part is, I want to be the best for you. And finally, I want you to have transcendent joy. So I want the best for you. I mean, that should be pretty fundamental to love. Sometimes we run into people whose idea of love is, I like the way I feel when I'm around you. And what they really mean by love is, I'm enjoying my experience. Not that I have any particular wanting for you, but that I'm enjoying my time with you. And that is a form of love, or at least a form of liking, certainly a form of enjoying somebody's company. But when we talk about loving someone, it means you really want the best for them. And the love that a husband and a wife have for one another should be the start of a foundation that hopefully perhaps someday they will have for their children, that they will want the best for their children. That the love for their children won't be limited to, I like the way I feel when my kids are around. And then hopefully as the kids grow up, the kids' love for their parents isn't going to be limited to, well, I like the way I feel when my parents are around. Because, of course, if this is all love really means, then that means when you're no longer liking the way you feel when you're around someone, it's not fun anymore, then the love will tend to go away if that's what the love is. But to the extent the love is, I want the best for you, that love never has to go away. That I can want the best for you in good times. I can want the best for you in hard times. I can want the best for you when we're together. I can want the best for you when we're apart. I'm based in San Diego. We're a Navy town, and so it's not at all uncommon for families to be separated for months at a time when there's a Westpac. We also are a Marine town, and so between the Navy and the Marines, it's not at all uncommon for families to be separated for up to a year. And if love is limited to how I feel when I'm around you, then we can have months at a time where there's no love. But if love is, I want the best for you, then that can endure the separations of war and the separations of deployments and the separations of Westpacs. I want to be the best for you. If I'm going to be your husband, that means I want to be the best husband for you. If I'm going to be your wife, that means I want to be the best wife for you. Part of being a husband, part of being a wife, part of committing to someone is committing to do your very best to be the best choice they could have made. to be someone who will be that husband, who will be that wife, who will be that partner, who will be the co-parent. That if we have children, I will be the father, I will be the mother, to the best of my ability to our children. In the cases where it's a blended family and someone's going to be a step-parent, that means I will seek to be the best step-parent I can be for your children. And that your children shall become my children, because a step-parent is a parent. And that all these things hopefully will have been worked out. And finally, I want you to have transcendent joy. Transcendent joy, to understand it, we take it in 3 simple steps. You have pleasure. Pleasure has a beginning, middle, and end. That if I'm enjoying my cheesecake, from my first bite of cheesecake to the last bite of cheesecake, I am enjoying the taste of the cheesecake. Once the cheesecake's gone, I've swallowed my last bite, the pleasure is over. Now, happiness is bigger than pleasure. Happiness can be much more pervasive than simple pleasure. You can be happy in anticipation. You can be happy remembering great things. Happiness is thinking positive thoughts most of the time. Happiness is, simply put, when your happiness rules are being followed, whatever those might be. Some people really aren't very good at being happy. Some people are really good at being happy. Some people can be happy for no reason. Their happiness rules are very, very simple to follow. Just so long as there's no really bad things going on, they're generally happy. Other people have very narrow, very specific happiness rules. It seems like that they seem to take a certain amount of commitment to seeking negative things and dwelling there. But happiness is when, in general, things are going about the way you would like them to be going for you to feel happy. Joy is a step beyond happiness, just as happiness is a step beyond pleasure. Joy means that even when things are going bad, you know there are larger truths. Joy, to step out of a marriage context for a little while, joy is that when you're a kid, if you know when your parents are mad at you, if you know when you're in trouble, that they love you. There's a certain comfort in that. There's a certain amount of what you might call a happiness, a certainty in that happiness, even in the middle of that time when you feel like they're mad at you and you're in trouble, and legitimately so. As between a husband and wife, as between peers. Things aren't always going to be going well. Every once in a while, we're going to mess up. And part of that joy is just knowing there is a larger truth than this moment. That there is a larger truth than this season. And that larger truth is a good truth. We talk about joy from a religious perspective, that even in the middle of terrible times, we know that God is on his throne. Even in the times where we feel like we've messed up the worst and we feel the most ashamed, that we know that Jesus died on the cross for us. And so that's the kind of foundation that gives joy. And so if I love you, I want you to have transcendent joy. I want you to be anchored to these truths that are bigger than moments. I want you to be anchored to realities that transcend the seasons we might be going through. Whether that season is a separation for a deployment, whether that season is a particularly difficult financial time, whether that season is going through an illness or some other family crisis, whether that season is going through a perhaps relatively dry period in our relationship, that wanting that those strong, powerful truths to both be true and to be known, so that you can feel some of those happy type feelings without necessarily needing good stuff to go on right now. That you can experience those happy type feelings even when things are terrible, because they can anchor to that stronger truth. And finally, with love, we have the love stack, called agape, phileo, eros. Agape is unconditional, Agape is character-based. Agape is who I am. Phileo is our relationship. Phileo goes up or down based on our interactions. Phileo goes up or down based on our interpretations of one another's actions. And then eros is getting back to those moments. Now you can think of agape, phileo, eros a lot like joy, happiness, and pleasure. Where eros is the pleasure. It's the sensation. It's those high points. And creating some of those momentary high points, those very intense moments of joy, of pleasure, a positive sensation to remember and reflect on and to have. And phileo, to build the relationship, to stack up all of our positive experiences that we share and that we have with one another. And agape, of being a loving person. Honor, the promise to love and to honor. To honor someone is to lift them up. So honor in part means I will lift you up. Honor also means I will reflect well on you. If I vow to honor you, that means that my presence in your life lifts you up. I don't tear you down, I lift you up. When I'm dealing with you individually, I don't judge you and condemn you. I don't diagnose you. And we get that very common, men are known for saying that the women are crazy and women are known for saying men are jerks. The vocabulary that they use might be somewhat more intense at times. But you can tell me, is that honoring? Does that focus on the best and try to understand the worst? Does that focus on the strengths and help us understand the weaknesses? Because none of us are going to be good at everything. I have certain temperaments. I tend to have a powerful personality, decision-making, getting stuff done. I tend to have a playful personality. I like to enjoy myself and have fun. What I don't have is a very precise temperament. If you're counting on me to keep everything organized, if you're counting on me to keeping everything in alphabetical and numerical order, I'm probably not going to be very good at that. And so as part of lifting me up or tearing me down, if you were to focus on my organizational abilities, you could very legitimately use that to tear me down. On the other hand, if you focus on my leadership, if you focus on my playful skills, well then you could be lifting me up. If you focus on my strengths, you'd be lifting me up. If you focus on my weaknesses, you could be tearing me down. And very legitimately tearing me down. I'm not even talking about people who overjudge. I'm just talking about the focus on weaknesses versus strengths. And I will reflect well on you is when we're out and about. And your reputation, or my presence, and the way I present myself and the way I interact with people is going to affect your reputation. That I will seek to reflect well on you. Now, of course, in both of these, it means that I'm not unjustly tearing you down. That even if I have anything bad to say, certainly I shouldn't go overboard. Certainly I shouldn't be making stuff up. Certainly I shouldn't be gossiping about my own partner. And that I will reflect well on you means that I am aware that who I am affects how you're seen. And that I will seek to reflect well on you in that regard. In the Bible, it talks about honor your father and your mother. One of the ideas there is, if I am the only Conway you ever meet, what would you think of Conways? If you were to just assume that what you see in me is what the house of Conway is like, what would you think of other members of the house? If what you see of me is what the extended family is like, that I'm just an ordinary Conway and this is what I am, would that reflect well on Conways, regardless of whether that's them or not? Likewise, if I'm married and you know me, what would you think of my wife? If you knew my wife, what would you think of me? What assumptions might you make based upon the quality and caliber of me as a man that you would make about my lady? What assumptions might you make about me if you knew my lady? And then when we're together somewhere, how well do I reflect on her? So if we are at a professional event, how well do I reflect on her being a professional? And so on and so forth. So I'm not, of course, tearing someone down in front of people. I'm, of course, not arguing with her in front of people. I mean, some of these things are pretty self-evident. But part of it is, suppose I'm one of those men who I hate wearing ties. Ugh, I don't ever want to wear a tie. And I'm at her professional event where coat and tie is the expected dress, and I'm there, and all I'm doing is complaining about being there, and complaining about having to wear. How well am I reflecting on my wife? And likewise, if I commit to going out somewhere with her, and I'm treating it like, I have to go to this stupid thing. Okay, fine, I said I would, I'm here. Would that reflect well on her? Would that show that I'm loving her, honoring her? And so part of honor is to reflect well on someone. That they can see by the person who knows her best and the way they see me treat her, the way they even see me look at her, hold her hand, hug her, kiss her, that I lift her up and that I reflect well on her. And of course, obviously, the same thing in the other direction. And then cherish. Now, when you get to cherish and obey, there's some interesting things in cherish and obey. That a lot of times when we do ceremonies, there'll be love, honor, and cherish, and love, honor, and cherish. Sometimes the love, honor, and cherish is the vow the husband makes to the wife, and the love, honor, and obey is the vow the wife makes to the husband. And so we're going to talk about cherish and obey perhaps a little bit differently. That when we're talking about cherish means I will treasure you. I will treat you as important. I will treat you as valuable. I will treat you as though you are the most valuable person in my life. Part of cherishing is romance. Part of cherishing is dates. And when you think about cherishing someone, and in particular I'm going to be focusing on a man cherishing a woman, if I cherish a woman, if I'm trying to build a relationship with her and I'm trying to treat her like she's important to me because she's important to me, and I want her to know she's important to me, what are some of the things I might do? I might take her out on dates. We might go out to lunches or dinners. We might go for long walks. I might hold her hand while I stroll and talk and listen to her. How do you cherish someone? How do you let someone know that they are enormously valuable to you? You might touch them a lot. You might talk to them a lot. You might compliment them a lot. You might buy them meaningful gifts. Maybe expensive, maybe very inexpensive. An example of a meaningful gift might be as simple a thing as you saw a little butterfly sticker and you know that she loves butterflies, and so you buy the little butterfly sticker. Or even just online, you know that she likes tigers and you saw a beautiful picture of a tiger and so you just posted it on her social media wall. All sorts of ways you can really show that you cherish someone, that you think about them, and that they're important to you, and that you remember things about them, that you remember their birthday, you remember the anniversary, you do special things for Valentine's Day. Think of all the things you would do if you're trying to woo a woman. All the things you might do if maybe she's uncertain, maybe she's ambivalent, maybe you've been friends for a long time and you don't have a romantic type of relationship, but you want her to know that you cherish her. What would you do? And part of a husband's vow to cherish his wife is, I will cherish you even after we're married. Among the complaints that sometimes I get in my office is that all the romance has gone away. That when women talk about their husbands, basically what they're talking about is, I don't feel cherished. I don't feel like I'm important to him. I feel like I'm more of an assistant or an accessory. I feel like he relies on me, but kind of more as a work and lover kind of thing, not that I'm important to him. And that if he could replace me by paying someone, he'd just as soon have anyone else in the role because I'm personally, individually, not that important. And I was just having this conversation with a wife earlier this week. And what was actually kind of curious is I'm having this conversation with one wife while another friend of mine who has a very different relationship with her husband is at a wedding. And so I mentally have this contrast going on. And part of what is fascinating about this is that we forget that the things that we did to get someone ought to really be kind of the things that we do to keep someone. And so we learn to cherish our wives and treat her like she's important. Don't take her for granted. Treat her as though you're still trying to earn her attention by letting her know how important she is. Now, obey. There are some pastors I know that won't do obey anymore. I do. Others that I know, if they do obey, they do it on both sides. The husband promises to love, honor, cherish, and obey his wife, as well as the wife promising to love, honor, cherish, and obey her husband. Now, typically, I won't do that. If someone made a compelling argument for it, certainly I would be more than happy to listen to them. But part of the vow to obey, the way I teach it, is much more complicated than just one person gets to call the shots. Part of the offer to obey means I trust your leadership. That I've seen the way you make decisions. I've seen that when you make decisions for the team. I've seen that you look at the big picture when you make decisions. I've seen that you are wise and rational about your decision making. I see you come from a loving place, seeing us as a unit, that you don't make selfish decisions, you make family decisions. That you don't make decisions for what you want just because you want it and you think it's good for you. You make decisions for us. You make the kind of decisions where I can trust if you made the call. You made the call not just for yourself. You made the call really honestly thinking about me. Now, if he is cherishing her and loving and honoring her while he's making the decision, she will have an elevated status in the decision making. Just by way of example, I've had cases where something I call standard shopping rules. And standard shopping rules means that she gets to buy whatever she wants. Now, the reason standard shopping rules are standard shopping rules is because my impulse, because of how much I cherish her, is much more inclined to want to invest more in her and with her than she would really want for herself. And so that's why standard shopping rules was developed, is because I will be more generous because I have such high regard and treasuring her. Now, it's the same thing when I make my decisions. I don't make selfish decisions. I take into account the big picture. So that she should know that I'm thinking about her. And there should never be a doubt in her mind whether I'm being selfish in my decision making or whether I'm thinking of the team. Now, what gets interesting about this part of how many men get it wrong, which I find troubling, and how many women refuse to do the obey because they do not trust their man. Their man individually, men in general, frankly. But when it comes down to the fact, if she does not trust that you are making decisions for the team, there's a problem. Accepting the obey vow means I accept this responsibility, that I am accepting the responsibility to always be thinking about us. I am accepting the responsibility, and as we get further down into the list, to having and holding and cleaving in particular, and forsaking, that all this is part of that responsibility. That I will be thinking about you. And then later on, I'll be thinking about our kids. Or if you're marrying into and creating an instant family, I will be thinking about our children. I will be thinking about our lives. I'll be thinking about my lifestyle and your lifestyle, the us, the life that we have together. And I accept the responsibility to be making decisions that way. Now, in my experience and observation, the wisest of partner leaders, because this is submission of one leader to another leader, it's submission of peers, is also very often, I will trust that you will recognize I'm a peer. I will trust that you will honor the fact that we are equals. I will trust that you will honor the fact I am not just here to be your assistant. I will trust that you will honor the fact I'm not just here to be your servant. I will trust the fact that you will honor that we are two adults in a partnership. And this brings us to our other part of what we mean by obey, of captain and commander. Captain and commander is a leader submitting to a leader. So think about it being on board ship, and if you've never been in the military, think about Star Trek. The captain and the commander, the first in command and the second in command. Now, it's not the job of the second in command to just kind of wait around for the captain to make a decision, and I don't do anything until the captain said. The commander has to be in command. When the captain's not around, the commander is making the decisions. A captain should be picking a commander the captain can trust to be a good decision maker, because if something happens to the captain, guess who's now the captain? The commander. Likewise, the commander seeks to serve under a captain that the commander trusts. Now, because a husband-wife relationship is entirely voluntary, no one assigns you anymore, that means you're making this call yourself. You're deciding, is this someone whose command I trust? On both sides. Do I trust this lady to be making decisions for my family? Likewise, she's deciding, do I trust this man to be making decisions for my family? For both of them, this is their ship. And you're sailing on your own adventure together. And you have to believe in the other leader, and you have to believe in the mission that you're on, and you have to believe in the ship you're sailing in the marriage. And then here's some big parts between captain and commander. The commander has not just the power, but the responsibility to belay orders that don't make any sense. To belay orders that never should have been made in the first place. To countermand orders at times, and even to remove the captain from command. Both of them have the authority to remove the other from their leadership post if the other one is not seeking the best leadership for the team. And understand that when a woman promises to obey as I teach it, she's not promising whatever you say goes. She's also stepping up and promising that I will be observing your decision making, and I will make my independent call as to how you're doing. And if you're doing okay, but I really think things should be different, we're going to have some discussions. Just as if you're the commander on a ship and the captain's making some decisions that it's not bad decisions, but you're concerned about the direction things are going, it is the obligation of the commander to go have this discussion. It is the obligation of the commander to step up to the captain, because by the chain of command, the commander is the only one who's supposed to. It's supposed to run up the chain of command. It's supposed to pass through the commander on the way to the captain. Those are the two people who have to be able to have this discussion and be able to sort it out. And if the commander determines the captain is not doing a good job, some of these instructions have to be ignored. Some of these instructions have to be reversed. And maybe the captain has to be removed from command. Likewise, sometimes the captain has to consider whether the commander needs to be removed from command. And you can imagine if leadership is coming down to that, you have a fundamental breakdown between the captain and the commander, while a husband-wife relationship is a voluntary relationship. And that's the way leadership and obedience works in a voluntary relationship. And so if she can trust his leadership, and he will be earnest in accepting and fulfilling that responsibility, if they can both be leaders and the leader submitting to the leader, submission of a peer to a peer, then this is a safe vow to make. And also understanding it doesn't mean that whatever he says goes. Because, I've seen cases where, the husband was flat out wrong, but he demanded his wife agree with him anyway. And that's not this kind of obedience. I mean, imagine if you're the commander on a ship and you know your captain is flat out wrong, but he demands that even though he's wrong, and you know he's wrong, you stand up and you back up your captain in the face of what you know is wrong. Imagine if that happens in the military. You could end up in battles and wars you have no business being in. You could end up failing to fulfill your mission. And you could even completely self-destruct because no one's standing up for what's right. And so these are things to consider in whether or not that vow is going to be a part of the deal. And when we get more into obedience and leadership and a bit more into forsaking and cleaving in later lessons, you'll understand that in greater depth. Then we have to have and to hold. To have is the sexual and the sex relationship, and to hold is the affection relationship. So when you promise to have, now it's interesting to me too that it's even in this order. To have and to hold. So part of the promise to have is there will be a sexual relationship here. That we will be having sex, which of course involves the possibility of children as well. And that we will have a sexual relationship that even goes beyond just there's going to be sex. Now, the way we make this distinction is the sex relationship, it basically has to do with baby-making behaviors. And the sexual relationship is all the things that go well beyond mere affection, obviously including sexual elements that doesn't include baby-making behaviors. And very often when you're engaged in that kind of relationship, it's very easy to just jump to the end. And that everything else is just a gateway to race to the end. So part of the have is the promise that this is going to be a part of our relationship. That this is going to be something that we do. This is not going to be something that will be denied to you that you will have to do without because one or the other of us just isn't in the mood. Or one or the other of us only wants that part but doesn't want to engage in this part. The whole part, which I find comes afterwards, is the reminder that just because you got to the end doesn't mean that the whole beginning part isn't still part of the deal. The holding, the affection relationship, the hugging, the kissing, the cuddling, the snuggles, all that's part of the holding. The affection relationship includes the romance, the playfulness, the dancing, all of those things you might do. And a basic way that I've defined like kind of an affectionate, sensual relationship with someone is imagine the things that a man might do in an attempt to slowly seduce a woman that he does not yet have a sexual relationship with. And it's amazing how some men go like, oh, but why would you do that? Because to so many men, unfortunately, that's about getting over there. Well, what we're talking about is, no, it starts here and it keeps expanding. It's not you leave off this part because now you've got over there. Is this whole thing is part of the relationship. So all the way over there, and all the stuff short of over there, and all the other stuff over here. A part of the affection relationship, the sensual relationship, also includes all of those things that she might do with other people too. So if she might have friends and she's huggy kissy with friends, if she might cuddle with kids and play with puppies and all of those things, that should be part of the marriage relationship too. And so a lot of times you'll see things where a lot of women won't have this kind of relationship with adult men, but they might do it with kids where they'll sit down and they'll kind of cuddle with the kids. And well, that should be part of the marriage relationship too. The cuddling and the cute kissing and the little swirly dances and slow dancing and all of these affection parts, whatever was part of the courtship, whatever was part of building up to that part, should still be there. That you don't leave that behind because now you have the rest. For better or worse. For better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, is partnership vows. For better or worse means we will be partners when things are better and things are worse. Sometimes I see people take this as permission to be the worst. And actually, there's a whole idea going around that if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. And there's two possible meanings for that. One, what someone means is when I'm going through really tough stuff, when I'm just a mess, if you can handle me when I'm just a hot mess, then you really do deserve me when I'm at my very best. If you can handle me when I'm having a bad day, when I have the migraine, when I have terrible things going on at work, I think that's a legitimate expression of that idea. But unfortunately, this is what else I'm seeing. What else I'm saying is, my worst is when I'm attacking you. My worst is when I'm judging you. My worst is when I'm condemning you. My worst is when I'm writing you down in public in front of people. That when I'm being the worst thing in your life, that my worst means I'm ripping you apart, and sometimes I'm even doing it in front of people. I might be doing it on the phone when I know you have people on your side. And I know that they can hear me. Even if they can't hear the words, they can hear that I'm talking to you. When I know that they can see you and that they can see that I'm hurting you and they can see that you're crying, because I want them to know that you deserve it. And that's being the worst. It gets abusive. And so for better or worse means, no, we will be partners. I will never be your worst. But I will be with you through the worst. We will be partners. And sometimes I'm not going to be able to do very well at stepping up and being an affirmative partner because I'm just going through all kinds of junk. That I've got stuff going on at work, or I'm reeling from the loss of a loved one in my family, or my mom's sick, and that I just don't have anything in me to give to you. But I'm not going to be attacking you. I'm not going to be the worst thing in your life. But I will be your partner when the worst stuff is happening. But it's not permission to be the worst thing. So I will be partners with you. You will be partners with me. We will be partners through the best of times and the worst of times. Richer or poorer means we will be partners when we are richer, and we will be partners when we are poorer. It doesn't give me the right to impoverish us, to go waste all of our money, to drink it away at the bar, or gamble it away at the casino, or whatever would do to financially impoverish us. It also includes wanting to enrich us as a partnership, not just financially, although that's a most obvious one, but to enrich us in our lives, our experience, and the depth and the resonance and the vividness of which we live and experience our lives. That we will be partners when things are going well financially. We will be partners when things are going poorly financially. We will be partners when we can buy a house. We will be partners if we lose the house in foreclosure. We will be partners if we're making money. We will be partners if we're going bankrupt. We will be partners if I've got the dream job and we've got the income. We will be partners if I've lost my job and my career's over. That's the richer or poor. Not the permission to impoverish us. Permission to just go spend all the money. But to be partners, regardless of which way the financial winds blow. In sickness and in health, we will be partners when we are sick, and we will be partners when we are healthy. Again, it's not permission to intentionally be sick. It's not permission that if I have a condition that I will refuse to take care of it. I've known diabetics, for instance, that refuse to watch what they eat. Refuse to take their own blood sugar, and they have all kinds of extra problems because of it. People who refuse to address their own health issues and just expect the partner will put up with it. Now, what it means is when either one of us or both of us are sick, we are partners. We will work together when we are sick and when we are healthy. Same concept of the partnership. Because sometimes we're going to get sick, and sometimes we're going to get really sick. And the longer we're together and the older we get, sometimes the more serious that can be and the longer that can last. And sooner or later in time, there might be the final illness. And will we still be partners through that? So the vows for all of those is a vow that we are partners. We are partners. We will be on the same side. We'll be looking out for each other. Not making it bad for each other, but making it better for each other, because when the storms come against us, we are partners. That we are never the storm against one another. That we are the king and the queen, and the relationship is our kingdom. And that we do not war with one another, because if the king and the queen go to war with one another, the kingdom falls. Then we get to some interesting vows: to forsake all others, to cleave to one another. A lot of times we think of this just sexually, that I won't have sex with anybody else and I will have sex with you. Well, we already talked about having and holding. Well, if the having is the sexual relationship and the holding is the sensual, affectionate relationship, well, then the cleaving should be something different. And the forsaking might also, therefore, also include something different. There's a concept in the Bible, leave, cleave, be one flesh. Now, leave, cleave, be one flesh, it's why a man will leave his mother and his father, will cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Now, the most evident meaning appears to be you're talking about physically, that you will physically leave the house of your mother and your father. You will physically cleave with your wife, and you will be one flesh, that now the two of you are one, the two have become one. But since we've already talked about the sexual relationship and the vows, to avoid being redundant, we're talking about something a little bit different in the cleave here, and I'll pop right back to forsake in a moment. The cleaving here is the my way, your way, our way. When I leave the house of my parents, when I leave behind whatever my past is. Now, at the time, it would be, it's just your parents' house. You go from your parents' house to your spouse's house. You go from being their child, adult child or not, to being the partner in this marriage. Part of what we're talking about today in the leaving and cleaving is that we have a whole history. If I've been living on my own for a while, well, it's that too. If I've had a string of other relationships, it's leaving that too. So part of cleaving, the idea is I'm coming to you, I have my way, and you have your way. And out of my way and your way, we need to build an our way. Out of the you and the me, we need to build a we. And so that's the idea we're talking about here with the cleaving, from the leave, cleave, be one flesh. So taking the leave part then, let's back up to forsake. To forsake all others doesn't just mean I'm not going to have an affair, whatever that might mean for somebody, and we'll talk more about this in a moment. It's that my partner will be my primary relationship. My partner will be my primary relationship. When it says, I will leave my mother and my father, this means my mom and dad don't call the shots anymore. They don't dictate my marriage. They don't dictate how I husband. They don't dictate how I father. They don't dictate how I wife, how I mother. They are not the leaders of this family. We are the leaders of this family. And so part of forsaking is my partner will be my primary relationship. I don't give anyone else priority over my partner. My wife is my number one. My husband is my number one. Now, a lot of people think that when you think about this in romantic terms, like, well, of course, I'm not going to have a romantic relationship with someone other than my spouse. Now, we're also talking about authority in your life. We're talking about where your priorities lie. And so part of the forsaking was violated in this particular example. A friend of mine was doing some marriage counseling. The wife was engaging in some rather bizarre behavior that was clearly destructive to the marriage, and everyone could see it. And in the session, it seemed like she could see it too. And the baffling question is, why are you doing this stuff? And it came out by her own words that she needs to please her father. She wants her daddy to be proud because she's daddy's little girl, and he's the only man who's really important. So who's her primary relationship? Her number one man in her life is her dad. Not her husband, her dad. And in a case like that, he, the husband, is not her primary relationship. So part of forsaking means you are promising to do your best and each other will be your first. Everyone else becomes secondary. They may be very important secondaries. You can almost think about the king and the queen on the top of the dais. And other people might be able to sit at your right hand and your left, but they are not the king and the queen. They might be allowed to that top step, but they do not rule this kingdom. They might be chief advisors, but they do not rule this kingdom. They are not the ones who are responsible for the decisions being made. And so whether it's family, friends, now here's the hard one, kids, the primary relationship must be primary. Now the simple idea when you're parenting is you build the lateral partnership, the horizontal partnership. Mom and dad form a partnership. The partnership raises the kids. What we see too often is the partnership dissolves and the focus becomes the kids. The kids become the center and the marriage and the household orbits around the kids. And the kids grow up seeing, say if mom's staying at home and she's always telling dad what to do when dad gets home, they see that, okay, in this world, mommies rule the universe, daddies are assistants to mommies. We see that a lot. Sometimes it's the other way around, that, well, mommy calls the shots when mommy's home, but when daddy shows up, also now daddy calls all of the shots, even if mommy disagrees, but it's still all about us. We still have control. We still get to decide. If I pitch a fit, it's all about me. If I just say I want something, it's all about me. And children are really bad foundations because they lack the maturity, the wisdom, the insight, the decision-making ability to really know what's best for them. I mean, for those of us who have been parents, we know as parents sometimes we struggle with what's best for our kids. Imagine a 5-year-old getting to decide what the 5-year-old wants is going to be best for the 5-year-old. That you could be 30 and be struggling with, I'm not always sure what to do. Well, you don't, if the 30-year-old's not always going to be sure, you don't turn it over to the 13-year-old. You don't turn it over to the kids. And sometimes we see that, where then the husband or the wife gets forsaken for the sake of the kids. Sometimes the husband or the wife gets forsaken for the sake of a job, for the sake of a career, for the sake of one individual's personal vision that the other one may or may not have bought into. If the partnership is bought into something, that's awesome. But when we're talking about forsaking, we're talking about everyone else is down at least one step. You will be my primary. Everyone else will be the secondary, no matter who they are, no matter how important they are. Now, sometimes some principles will govern, such as if my mother's less important than my wife, that if my mother and my wife both tell me to do something, that who I'm most likely to listen to or give more weight to should be my wife. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to do what's wrong over what's right or what's foolish over what's wise, because those govern all relationships. But it means if it comes down to a position of my mom says red, my wife says blue, I really don't care. Go with my wife. Let it be blue. It's not my mother's house, it's my wife's house. My wife gets the wife's color. Now, if my mother says red, my wife says blue, and I say green, well, then we're going to have a discussion about blue and green. We're not going to have a discussion about red. Because it's not my mom's family, it's our family. Part of forsaking can also take into account things like if my mom got sick and she needs her son, that can take priority. And if my wife says, well, you need to be here for our barbecue, I don't care if your mom's in the hospital. Okay, that's not good partnership. And I'm going to go see my mom in the hospital, but why? Because someone who's sick takes priority over someone who's healthy. Basic principles like that. So forsake doesn't mean this person is the center of the universe and no one else exists. It means this person's primary. All things being equal, this person always comes first. Well, then takes us to the cleaving. If I've done the forsaking, if you are my primary relationship, then we are making an our way. We are building an our life. So there's my way, your way, our way. My life, your life, our life. We are building something together. And if our children grow up with us, this will be their my way. Because this is how we built our way. Now, the challenge we have sometimes with cleave, especially with strong personalities, what often tends to happen is my way is my way, your way is going to become my way. And so our way will be my way. And to whatever extent our way looks just like my way, to the extent our way looks exactly like how I would call it with none of your input, chances are it's not really an our way, it's a my way, and I've demanded you submit to my way. Just like with a you, me, we. There's you, there's me. We're going to build a we. This new team of we should include both me and you. If we are an us, then all I've really done is either become someone's subordinate or I've taken on a subordinate. I'm not the boss. I may be the leader, but it's not like this is my company and I'm going to hire my assistants and everyone else is disposable. I just need to fit you into a slot. One of the things about every relationship I've had is they all are unique. And part of what makes all of them unique is that the woman in the relationship has always been a different woman. And so as a consequence, a whole bunch of unique stuff shows up in the relationship because it's not just me looking for an assistant. And so the extent to which I see the ebb and the flow from relationship to relationship is part of the we-ness of it. That's my relationship with one person is unique from my relationship with somebody else. It's because who she is an equal part of this relationship, which means all the me part gets to stay in here. And when the her part is a different her, that's a whole different dynamic. And when you're doing the cleaving, when you're making our ways, your our way with one person will be different than your our way with a different person. The we with one person will be different than your we with another person. Now, this is hard to gauge if you've never had a previous relationship, because when you step into your very first relationship, it's hard to tell sometimes. But if you've had a few relationships, a few dating relationships, or if you've been married before, you've gotten to see to what extent you do the we thing, you do the our way thing. And if I've had, say, 2 relationships, 3 relationships, 4 relationships, and they all look pretty much the same, what that probably means is that I'm doing Scott, and I'm expecting her to be assistant to Scott. I want to plug her into my life, but I'm not creating an our life with her. And I'm just looking for someone who hopefully is weak enough or insecure enough that she doesn't really have anything. She really feels like she wants to contribute, and she's willing to just be my subordinate, my servant, my assistant. Even if you haven't had a previous relationship, by the time you're getting up to the point of marriage, hopefully you have enough experience to know how much of you is in this relationship. How much of you is in this relationship by partnership versus concession. Because sometimes you get it by concession where everything has to be my way except the stuff I don't care about. If I don't care about it, I don't care about it. You can do whatever you want. But everything I care about has to go my way. So then you don't have a cleave relationship. And so part of the my way, your way, our way is couples. Married couples are creating an us. Married couples are creating an our way. Married couples are creating a we. Now here's part of the hard part of this. As long as we both shall live. This is a lifelong deal. This is a lifelong deal even if the marriage ends. And is especially a lifelong deal with a marriage ends and there's children involved. Now, unfortunately, the only way you can really see how well this is likely to go is if someone does have previous relationships. And how well do they still do on showing love, honor, cherish, or obey, have, hold, better or worse, richer or poorer, sickness and health, forsake and cleave as appropriate for whatever that other relationship is. So if my wife and I have children and we divorce, should I still love her? It's my children's mother. Should I still honor her? Now, what the love and the honor, and certainly what the cherish looks like, and the leadership looks like, is going to be different. Because now you're no longer a partnership. But you should still partner in your parenting, right? And so to that extent, there should still be this kind of partnership. And the having will go away. The holding will be adjusted to whatever is appropriate for the level of relationship you have. Still wanting the better, still wanting the richer, still wanting the health. Putting them in their proper place. Because when you get married, the reason your spouse is your primary relationship is that's your spouse's proper place. If it's an ex-spouse, friend, co-parent, that's a different proper place, but you still put them in their proper place. And for cleaving, there's still an our way, but it's a different kind of our way. It's not that, well, I'm the dad, I do stuff my way, and you're the mom, you do stuff the mom way. That to whatever extent we can, just for the sake of the children, we need to have as much of an our style of parenting as we can muster in our broken partnership. And to keep this deal as long as we both shall live. And that can be tricky, to understand that this isn't just a promise to stay married. This is a promise to keep this deal for as long as we both shall live. And even if the deal gets broken and broken badly enough, we call it off. I still made these promises. And to the extent they still apply to whatever the relationship is we have, I will do these even if we're mad at each other, hurt by each other, because the deal's a deal, as much as we can. So to wrap up, a relationship is a deal, so you stick to the deal. If I say love, honor, cherish, I will love, honor, cherish. If I say have, hold, I will have, hold. If I want the better, I want the health, I want the richer, I will pursue that. Relationship is a deal, stick to the deal. Now, a deal is not that one, the other, or both get to do whatever they want and the other one just can't leave. That's the way some people interpret this. Is as long as we both shall live means, well, you're not allowed to divorce me. I can be as crappy to you as I feel like, and you can't leave. You have to put up with it and be happy about it. And I've seen people with that kind of attitude. That the deal is love, honor, cherish. I promise to love you as long as we both shall live. I promise to honor you as long as we both shall live. I promise to cherish you as long as we both shall live. That's the deal. If I break that deal, I break the deal. And then, depending how bad I break the deal, you can decide if the deal's off. Now, it isn't that only one side has to keep the deal and the other can do whatever they want. The deal's the deal. Now, if you need to change the deal, change the deal. But you always have to be aware of unilateral deal changes. Because whenever there's a unilateral deal change, if there's a unilateral deal breaking, you're always at risk of breaking the deal. I mean, you can think about it as a contract. What do you do when someone breaches a contract? Contract's off. Can you form a new contract? Can you adjust the agreement? Of course you can. Now, what do you do if someone breaks a covenant? Well, if they break a covenant, well, you go to war. So you might think about it as whether you want to look at it as a covenant or a contract. Because I do see people treat it like a covenant, and you broke the deal, we're going to war, and then you end up with a war. And that gets nasty. So just remember that you're promising the deal. You're not promising as long as we both shall live that no matter how crappy we are to each other, we'll stay married. You're promising as long as we both shall live, love, honor, cherish. You're promising as long as we both shall live, honor, obey. We're promising as both as we shall live, have, hold. We're promising as long as we both shall live, better or worse, richer or poorer, sickness and health, to be partners. We're promising as long as we both shall live, to forsake others, to keep each other in one another's proper place. To cleave, to make an our way, to constantly building an our way. And that's the as long as we both shall live. And if you do that, then you don't have to worry about divorce. That it takes some pretty extraordinary circumstances to create a divorce between couples that are love, honor, cherish, and doing the whole vows. If you keep all of those vows, That's what being faithful is. Being faithful is in your marriage and with others. This is huge. Sometimes we tend to think, for whatever reason, as faithful and loyal as whether or not someone has an affair. However we might define affairs, and some people are pretty broad about what they mean by affair. Like, well, you looked at that person, and you talked to that person. That person, like, clicked like on your picture on social media. And there are some people that get bent out of shape over even that level of interaction. But a lot of times people think about faithful or loyal as in what did you do with somebody else. But think about this. In every other relationship we have, like, what's a faithful employee? Does that mean someone who just doesn't have a side job, doesn't ever do side work for anyone? Think about a faithful friend. Does that mean someone who doesn't have any other friends? No, it's much bigger than that. It's in how well we keep all the vows. How well does your employee do their job and support the company? How well do your teammates on your sports team? Does it mean that they never play any other sports? No. But if they're a faithful member of your sports team, it means that they show up when they're supposed to show up and they do what they're supposed to do. You don't care if they're on your baseball team, if they play, if they go bowling and they play soccer. What you care about is how do they behave when they're here. Same thing with your friends. How faithful a friend someone is doesn't mean they have no other friends but you. What it means is that they back you up, and that and they're even willing to call you on the carpet if they know you're wrong. But they won't call you out in front of people. They'll do that privately. That if they hear people talking smack about you, they will defend you, because that's what a faithful friend does. And so when we're talking about a faithful spouse, we're talking about that. It's not that all that disappears and now it's just this opposite thing. It may expand into that opposite thing, but it's expanding into it, not leaving this behind. So you think about how you keep all the vows. Love, honor, cherish, and all the rest is part of being a faithful spouse. If you want to be a faithful spouse, you faithfully love. If you want to be a loyal spouse, you loyally honor. You loyally cherish, you loyally obey and lead and think about the team. You loyally have, you're faithful to the holding. You're faithful and loyal to the cleaving. You're faithful and loyal to keeping the primary relationship primary. Now, none of us will be perfect, but we also do not excuse ourselves from doing what we said we do. That we still do what we said we would do. Now, when I've taken engaged couples through this entire process, the most common response I get as I go through each piece was nodding, well, yeah, of course, yeah. Because when you're in the throes of love, when you're engaged and you're on your way to getting married, these seem easy and self-evident. Like, of course, you can't imagine doing it any differently than this. But part of the reason they are vows is that there will be times it's not easy to do. Part of the reason they're vows is there's going to be times where you're really going to feel like doing the opposite. And that's why we make these kind of promises. And to understand that if I break the deal, I mean, think about it. If you have a faithless friend, they are not being a good friend, but they demand you be a faithful friend. Or if you work for a company and they demand you be a faithful employee, but they're being a faithless employer. They're not holding up their end of the bargain, but they expect you to hold up yours. They're not paying you for the overtime, but they demand that you work it, and so on and so forth. There gets to be a place where you go, okay, look, if you're not keeping the deal, I'm not keeping the deal. Now, I could just quit and go find a job somewhere else, or I could say, look, I'm just not going to keep the whole deal. If you're not keeping the deal, I'm not keeping the deal. And sometimes you get that. Sometimes just as a matter of survival. And so we have to keep that part in mind. That if I mistreat my spouse, I don't deserve her faithfulness. Now that doesn't mean I sign off on her having an affair. But what it means is I might put her in a position, if I'm leading poorly, because I've accepted that responsibility, but I'm being selfish about it, she may have an obligation to not obey. If I'm not cherishing her, and I'm not holding her, but I'm demanding the having, I might miss out on some having. I might miss out on having completely. If I'm not putting her as my primary relationship, or if I'm being the worst to her, I might put her in a position where she has to put someone else primary. So in that husband-wife scenario, if the husband was being a really bad husband, he might have to push her to dad being the number one man in her life. In that case, he was being a good husband. She would still put dad number one. And so this whole thing working depends on both sides doing the deal. If both sides do the deal works beautifully. If one side stops doing the deal, not makes a mistake, not blows it, but just stops doing the deal, the whole thing can fall apart. Because one person shouldn't be expected to always do the whole part of their deal while the other person's not holding up their side. But that might be okay for a season, for a good reason. That's not okay as a standard policy. In the end, 80% of marriage boils down to just one principle. We are partners, not opponents. I can't even tell you how many times I've dealt with married couples over the 20, 30 years I've been doing coaching and counseling into relationships, where it just boils down to this one idea. We are partners, not opponents. Why are you treating them like an opponent? They're your partner. But they just get into these patterns. Now sometimes it's partners, not opponents, and the opponent version is villain-victim. Sometimes it's villain versus villain. Both sides are doing bad stuff. And they're being mean to each other. And bizarrely enough, there are some people who like it that way. They like being mean to each other. That's part of the whole thing, is they wanted this committed relationship because the commitment gives them permission to target the other person. Not the way I would recommend doing things, but there are some people where that's the deal that they have. Is that, and both of them do it to each other. And you know, one of the more willing to be public versions that we see sometimes is the couples that prank each other. I don't really get that, but if that works for them, that's up to them. But the idea of the vows is even in those cases, what have they done? They've chosen the we. They've chosen the cleave. They've built an our way, and that's their way. Is that okay? It's okay with me if it's okay with them. But so long as it's okay with each one of them. Sometimes deals change. Sometimes things change. I've seen a lot of people want to change the deal when kids are coming. That what they were doing without kids is no longer suitable with kids, and they need to change the deal. Deal changes work best if you talk about them. Deal changes work best if there's good communication about them. So you can decide what your deal is going to be. Now, for those of you who are still single, whether you're engaged on your way to getting married, of course, that's most of what this is for, or you're already married and this is kind of a review for you, or maybe it's a new twist on stuff for you, because you're looking on restoring the quality of your marriage relationship within your marital status, or you're single and thinking, you know, someday I might like to get married. Know this. I've taught this to kids. And I've taught this to kids in the context of before you're old enough to date. Let me introduce a few ideas to you. Because part of this is, if you're going to practice love, do you have anyone in your life that you can love? Anyone in your life you can want the best for? Anyone in your life you can want to be the best for? Anyone in your life you can want to have transcendent joy? Any way you can practice the character of love, building relationships and building experiences? Yeah. Kids have that with their family and their friends. You don't even need a romance to do some of these. So you can practice them so they become a habit. Practice honoring people, lifting people up, reflecting well on people. Practice cherishing, practice treasuring people, treating them like they're important. Practice team leadership, and practice evaluating people on their team leadership. Be practicing the captain and commander evaluations. Be practicing the better or worse, and being partners with people when they go through hard stuff. Practice richer or poorer and being partners with people, whether they're building something or whether they've lost something. Practice partnership, helping with people who might be struggling with an illness, or people who are in recovery, or people who are healthy. In your romances, practice an appropriate level of holding, an appropriate level of having, based upon the nature of that relationship. Practice keeping your relationships in their proper places. If you're a kid, your primary relationship should be your parents. As you're building your friendships and your romances, decide who deserves which proper place. What is the proper place of an employer? Certainly an employer has a right to determine stuff that affects employment, but how much right does the employer have to decide what you do at home? And so on and so forth. And you decide what the proper place is of various people in your lives. I'm a martial arts instructor. You walk into my martial arts school, you are under my authority. You walk out of my martial arts school, you're not under my authority. However, you use what I teach you. You might expect me to show up. I got a call from a school one time because one of my kids, my students, kicked another kid in the head. They knew I was the karate teacher. I showed up at that school. Because, well, I have no authority at the school. They said, but you are the authority in the martial arts stuff. And this is a martial arts thing, so we're going to call on you. Now, could I show up at the school and demand authority? No. Because it's their zone, and so they could give it to me, but I couldn't demand it. And so knowing what everyone's proper place is in your life. What do they have the authority to do? What do they not have the authority to do? And to build all kinds of different hour ways with different friends and different groups and into different circumstances. And to be practicing these things. And the more you practice these things, and then if you get to the level you have ex-friends, ex-boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, you can see how well you do these as long as we both shall live part. And that you can be practicing that. And how old do you have to be to have some place to practice any part of it? Kids, little kids, can practice some pieces of this. And as adults, we model it. Kids, they can practice it. If they're learning some of this as they go into their very first dating relationships, and this is part of their framework as they go in, then it helps them be able to deal with one another respectfully, instead of just on raw emotion. And to have healthier relationships rather than unhealthy relationships. And that we help them by showing them what can be seen in the marriages that they are exposed to, particularly with their own parents. That this is what they see. And for those of us who might not be the parents and they only get to intersect from time to time, that this is what they see. And that if we blow it, we blow it. That's okay. And you're not expected to be perfect. But then how do you handle blowing it? How do you handle your apologies? How do you handle, what burdens you dump on your partner versus what burdens you accept for yourself? Because sometimes when you blow it, you need to fix it. You need to handle it. Don't dump it on your partner for them to have to take care of it. Like, oh, honey, blew this. Take care of it. Get it fixed. Because it might not be theirs to get fixed. In fact, that's kind of a fundamental sometimes when we're dealing with young people. If it was your mistake, you handle it. As simple a thing as you forgot your homework. Don't call mom and have mom come run in and bring your assignment in. And there's some schools that it happens so often, they actually have a rule. It says parents are not allowed to rescue their kids. If your kid made the mistake, that's your kid's problem. The 10:30 p.m., oh my gosh, I have this assignment due tomorrow, can we go to the store and get stuff? And you're looking for the Walmart that's open to midnight to go buy supplies. Because you're running to rescue the kid's bad decisions. So the person who has to change is the one, or the person who pays the price is usually the one who ends up changing. And so if you created a mess, sometimes you should clean up the mess. Now sometimes there's nothing you can do. So if I create a financial mess, but I'm not a breadwinner, that my spouse earns all the money, then I need to get permission, but I should still handle as much of it as I can because the one who's paying the price, the one who has to fix it, is very often the one who will actually change. If I keep blowing it and expect my partner to fix it, I'm probably not going to get any better at stuff because I'm not the one paying a price for it, and so on and so forth. So all the basic fundamentals of relationship apply all across the board. And that we can be an example of this. So not only be doing it in our marriages, but be practicing it in our romances, practicing it in our friendships, practicing it in our families. And even if the idea of marriage is far, far away, these principles are good principles to be practicing. So if you know someone who either has or may someday want to have a marriage, who has or may someday want to have a romance, and you think that this message would be beneficial to them, it's obviously most appropriate for engaged couples working their way toward a marriage. It's also very powerful for married couples who are already married and may be revisiting the vows and thinking about how well they're doing on pieces. But it's also enormously powerful to be shared with people who are dating and people who would someday like to date and someday like to get married. And let's have them get to look at some of the stuff too. We'll be dealing with some of the more difficult ideas in here, the more deep, complex ideas coming up. But this gives you a solid overview. And when I do a wedding ceremony, I do about a 20-minute version of the vows. So that way the people know what this couple is about to vow. And they can be held accountable to keep those vows. Thank you very much.